But let's move on now. So the ABC has been forced to apologise to 2 national MPs after one of its political reporters falsely claimed that they abandoned their electorates while people were dying. Check this out.
I think the other thing that's probably really important to regional communities is that they have a local member who's there when their electorate is, for example, flooding. So I went through this earlier today. I went and checked. So on Wednesday afternoon, there was a 63-year-old man in Moto, that's near Tyree, that's in Alison Penfold's seat, the National. He died. On Thursday morning, the body was recovered of a man in his 30s in Rosewood, that's in her seat as well. On Thursday afternoon, that's when we had the press conference from the Nationals in the hall, just to go over that timeline. A 60-year-old woman died in her car near Coffs Harbour in this flood. That's in Pat Conahan's seat of Cowper. I think the important thing is that when you're in opposition, it's also still your job to be a local member and represent your communities and to be there for them.
Now, initially when I saw this story, I thought, oh no, some poor reporter we've never heard of has made an innocent mistake. Oh, this is really sad and awkward. But you can hear there, this was no innocent mistake. She was on a witch hunt to attack National Party MPs. She researched everyone who had died in their electorates, which is totally a tragedy. But she failed to check whether the MPs were actually there. And in fact, they were. They never abandoned their electorates.
50% of her research was outstanding. It was just the other 50%, which was pretty much non-existent and meant that the ABC had to issue an apology, which is pretty embarrassing. It just goes to show it's just easy to whack a member of the coalition, and the ABC are pretty proficient at that, and it's a classic example of just take a whack without checking first to see whether it was deserved or in fact based on truth.
Well, I think this might have proved that it's not that easy to take a whack at a member of the coalition because there was no basis for the whack whatsoever. I mean, you know, if you're going to go for someone, you've actually got to get your facts right before you do it. And I had a situation a bit like this, not involving the ABC, but a journalist at an outlet that will remain unnamed sent me this email recently saying, you said this on air and this is wrong and that was wrong and we're going to write it up. And I went back and methodically went through exactly what I had said on air and how it all had basis in fact, and that what they were telling me I had said was wrong. I could point to the exact piece in the document where it said, no, what I've said is exactly true. Funnily enough, that piece didn't end up getting written. At least they did the due diligence to reach out beforehand and ask before they ran the piece. What has happened here is a journalist has gone on air and run her mouth and said, oh, well, you know, why aren't they in their electorate? Now, if she had made the point that all of this is a great sideshow while there is a natural disaster going on, and that the Nationals as a party room should have been far more interested in flood victims than their own personal issues this week. That would have been a totally legitimate point to make. But she deliberately and specifically pointed out MPs and suggested that they weren't in their electorates when they were. I mean, it is the most basic stuff. And here but for the grace of God go I. You and I have worked as newspaper reporters, James. We've all made mistakes before and had to issue retractions for some minor issue or whatever. But this is a pretty big one.
Well, and when you're talking on live television, off the cuff, you can say things, you know, in the heat of the moment that maybe it was not exactly correct, or maybe you're kind of sure but not totally sure. But as you said, Freya, she had her notes there. She came prepared to make this charge, to fire this bullet, only to find it wasn't true at all. And, of course, the damage is always that so many more people actually see the initial report, which is inaccurate, than see the retraction, and so the damage is done.
And it also just continues to erode public trust in the ABC. And that's what's happening consistently over time when you make these political attacks that clearly are politically and emotionally motivated. People get annoyed.
Well, remember ABC had a deal with RMIT for a fact-check unit?
That's right.
I mean, if that...
Whatever happened to that?
If that... Well, it went by the wayside because even the ABC worked out that their fact-check unit wasn't all that crash hot.